Did Curiosity Enlighten the Cat? By Mark Spruce. Written in July 2026. Curiosity killed the cat, so the famous saying goes. I don't agree. In my opinion, curiosity and creativity are the two greatest characteristics a human can possess. I mean, who wouldn't say to themselves, what's at the end of that road? What's around that corner? What's inside that empty building? What happens if I press this red button? Don't press the red button! Okay, there are reasonable limits to curiosity, and maybe the saying should be, curiosity killed the cat, eventually. Geography and maps have been a lifetime interest for me. You can travel all over the world just by studying maps. It was curiosity, combined with looking at a map, that began this whole story. I hope you enjoy it, and I'm going to use some pictures to help illustrate this one. My wife and I enjoy going out and exploring our local area. And one day in the spring of 2022, I was looking at a map of Nottinghamshire, searching for a potentially interesting place to visit. The mighty River Trent, once it passes Newark, flows more or less north along the border between Nottinghamshire and Lincolnshire until it reaches the Humber estuary. Between the river crossings, there are long stretches dotted with small and relatively remote villages on either bank. I'm sure there'll be somewhere interesting to explore along there. Whilst looking at the map of the area, my eyes came to rest on what looked like the tiny hamlet of Fledborough. It looked quite remote. I like remote places. Let's go there. So, on a bright sunny morning, we set off on the 16-mile drive north. We reached our destination in less than half an hour. The single-track lane came to an end near the banks of the Trent, and we parked under some large trees. Fledborough basically consists of a manor house, an old rectory and a small church. There appeared to be nothing else there. There was not another soul around, and the silence was overwhelming. Just a light breeze blowing through the trees and some occasional bird song. What a wonderful spot! We first took a walk down to this remote part of the river, and after sitting on the bank for a while, we returned to explore the church. I wonder what we might find inside. Curiosity again. Thankfully, it was open, and the contrast from the bright, warm sunshine outside to the cool darkness inside was striking. By its design, the church was obviously medieval. We've visited a lot of churches over the years, and you do get to recognise different styles of church architecture after a while. It was eerily quiet and still inside, and you could almost feel the ghosts of the parishioners who had worshipped there over the centuries. I noticed some excellent medieval stained glass in one window, and on looking at the small Victorian church organ, I noticed a dusty card lying on it amongst the cobwebs. Curiosity made me turn it over to read what was on it. It was an announcement of a broadcast on the Home Service by Harry Seacombe about a welfare charity for ex-servicemen. The date of the broadcast was to be the 18th of September, but it didn't say the year. The Home Service. Just how long had that piece of card lain there? As is often our routine, at some point on our visit, my wife will sit down to do a sketch of whatever catches her eye. While she does that, I will wander off for a mooch around and explore to take some pictures and just generally occupy myself for half an hour or so. On this occasion, my wife sat down by a low wall to sketch the church, and I went for a wander around the graveyard. I've always enjoyed wandering around old graveyards. The curious names of some of the deceased, their ages when they died, the inscriptions, sometimes their occupations, and the designs of the various gravestones. It's all interesting to me. I'd done a full circuit of the church when my attention was caught by one particular, very solid granite gravestone near the church entrance. The headstone was massively thick, and the name on it aroused my curiosity. George Bertram de Betham Kershaw, died 1935. Well, that's quite a name, I thought. I wonder who he was. He must have been someone of reasonable wealth to have afforded a gravestone like that. Luckily, even though we were in a relatively remote spot, I could still get a phone signal. I put Kershaw's name into Google and was absolutely amazed to find he still had a book for sale on Amazon. What? Well, talk about curiosity being aroused. Who was this chap? What had he done? And why was he buried in this remote little churchyard? The book he had written was an academic text called Modern Methods of Sewage Purification. Not the catchiest of titles, I'll admit. But my wife was still deeply engrossed in her sketching, so I sat down in the shade of the church and started doing a bit of online research. Kershaw had been born the 6th of 7 children in Nottinghamshire in 1874. His father had been vicar of Fledborough, and it must have been a good living, as the 1881 census showed the vicarage had 3 servants at the time. He attended Malvern College, Worcestershire, and then completed his engineering training before starting his employment as an engineering consultant in London. In 1899, he was appointed engineer to the Royal Commission on Sewage Disposal. To quote from the articles I found online, he investigated, in conjunction with chemists and biologists, the various methods of sewage disposal and purification throughout the United Kingdom, reporting on and preparing plans concerning the engineering questions involved in sewage disposal. In 1909, he went into private practice and was a consultant on new sewage systems for towns all across the UK. By 1911, he was 37 years old, married and living in West Wickham, Kent, in a large house with a full-time cook and housemaid. This chap was doing very well for himself indeed. This was also the year when he published his book that's still listed on Amazon. In 1914, he becomes a member of the Institution of Civil Engineers, and the following year published a second book called Sewage Purification and Disposal. This man, you could say, literally knew his shit. Incidentally, do you know the difference between sewage and sewerage? No, me neither. Sewerage is the name for the infrastructure, the pipes, treatment works, etc. And sewage is the stuff that passes through it. So there you go. By 1920, he's living on a smart street in London SW1. And when he died in 1935, he left an estate worth the equivalent of nearly £3 million in today's money. I also found out, as a bit of a side research, that programme card featuring Harry Seacombe on the Home Service had been broadcast in 1966. That card had laid there for nearly 60 years. It is amazing what you can find out with a bit of online research these days. I've become so absorbed in all this. It was a surprise when my wife came over to me and said she'd finished her sketch and perhaps we should be heading home. Over the next few days, my curiosity about Kershaw continued, and I did a lot more research to find out even more details about his illustrious career. I was also curious to see what he looked like, and as I couldn't find a picture of him online, I decided to enter his name into the Ancestry website to see if I could find any living relatives who might have one. I won't say I was at the point where the cat got killed, but Kershaw certainly became a bit of an obsession for a few weeks. Now this is where the story took another interesting turn. Via some correspondence on Ancestry, I made connection with a distant relative of Kershaw's called Sue. It turned out Kershaw did not have any children of his own, so there are no direct ancestors. But a relative of Sue's had a whole load of information about Kershaw that she emailed to me. It made fascinating reading, and I found out so much more about the man behind that imposing name on that gravestone in a remote churchyard. These are just a few snippets of information from the long account given of his life in a family archive. Although I'm not sure when this account was written, apparently he was of great physical strength, and whilst a pupil at Malvern, his forearm measured 14.5 inches round, and his record of 55 pull-ups in the inter-schools gymnastics competition has never been beaten. In addition, he was a great climber, footballer and fisherman. One line said that he had a keen, almost wicked sense of humour, and that he was very tender-hearted and loved children. That last note, I have to say, seemed especially poignant, as he never had any children of his own. The account also says that he was a first-class naturalist. He was thorough and observant, and won the botanical prize at Malvern. During his working life as a consultant engineer, he visited Egypt, the Sudan, America, Bermuda and India. He advised the cities of Bombay and Khartoum on the creation of sewage disposal systems. He was a member of several American engineering societies and eventually became president of the Institution of Sanitary Engineers. In addition to his work, he was apparently also a talented musician. He played the organ, violin and cornet, and to quote, was an exceptionally good carpenter. According to the report, alongside various cabinets, he also built the organ in Fledborough Church, presumably the one that the Harry Seacombe card had rested on. This chap was so talented in so many fields, it honestly hardly seems possible. Maybe though, given his prodigious work rate, travels and other activities, it's not surprising that he suffered a stroke at the age of 56. He never fully recovered and he died in his 61st year. After such a full and rewarding life, his body was brought back from London to the tiny hamlet of Fledborough, and he was buried alongside his parents. What an incredible and now sadly forgotten man. And all this because I was looking at a map and curiosity led us to Fledborough in the first place. Sadly, despite all the wealth of information about Kershaw's life, Sue was unable to provide a photograph of the great man. Maybe one still exists out there somewhere. If anyone can find one, I'd love to see it. There was one final twist to this story. I'd researched information on a random name in a graveyard in Nottinghamshire. That led me to making contact with Sue, to whom he was very distantly related, and obviously I've never met her in my life. In the course of our correspondence though, Sue mentioned she and her husband had moved from Kent to a, quote, South Wiltshire village some years previously. Out of curiosity, having grown up in that region, I asked where she now lived. I was absolutely stunned when she told me she lived in my old village, in a house only a few hundred yards from the one I'd grown up in. Honestly, what an incredible coincidence! So, that is the story of where curiosity led me on one occasion. The cat didn't die. He was enlightened. Spruce Casts, an eclectic collection of anecdotes, reflections and stories by Mark Spruce.